not pretty enough to look at in the morning anyway.
Well, we're recording now, Ed. So you and I have been going back and forth. We posted that video about FOC, I don't know, probably 10 days ago, maybe.
Yep.
And we've had a tremendous amount of great questions and people really curious and asking a lot of the same stuff. So I'm planning two or three different videos with you, but this will be the first one. And I wanted to talk to you about momentum because despite all of your Jedi training for me, you said a couple of things and my head started smoking and I realized, holy smokes, that's what that means. But before we get going, we want to do a little house cleaning. So there's a couple of things you wanted to throw out there, and let's roll with that. And then we'll start talking about why momentum is important.
All right. Well, first thing I wanted to do was put our commercial for the foundation back up here. My shameless begging for people to support us.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
I do want people to know that they can go to our website and they can sign up for our newsletter for free. That costs nothing. It now we try to get it out every month, but there's only a handful of us doing all the work, and some months we just don't get it out there. But it comes to you free in your email. But there's a number of good reasons for people to support the foundation. We're trying to carry on all the research, and we will not accept funding from the archery industry. And that takes away a huge pool of money from us, but it keeps us independent from any industry support. So all the testing we do, all the equipment we buy the broadheads, we buy the arrows, we buy the fletching across the counter at retail prices, just like everybody else does. As a matter of fact, a lot of the equipment is bought anonymously so that the manufacturer has no idea it's going into the testing,
And that
because
includes
we
all the
want what we
travel.
test to be just what the archer out there buys.
And we also have to pay for travel. It's not cheap to go shoot at Cape Buffalo.
Well, it's not. And even though Rob does most of the testing now because I'm no longer able to, he pays that out of his pocket.
Right.
He pays for the travel, and he pays for the trophy fee of the animal, and of course the materials that he uses in the testing. The foundation's paying for that, but he's bearing the brunt of the expense for it. And that's a big contribution that he makes to the foundation. And I didn't have that. I was there. The animals I hunted were for free. The animals I tested on were for free. Uh, so we're encountering a lot more expense than we did when I was
Mm.
testing. And I still, just in equipment and my travel expenses to get to where I was going to test, I calculate that I spent well over $500,000 doing the study out of
Oh,
my own
my.
pocket. So it was quite expensive.
Well, it's 30
And
years. I mean, it takes
if
a
we're
while.
going to carry on testing, we're going to need financial support from the individual bow hunters out there. And I wanted to throw out another good reason they need to look at supporting the foundation. And it comes from a comment you made earlier today. And you said one day all of our information, talking about the foundation, will be needed so that people will be permitted to bow hunt. I want to be sure that's attributed to you, because I think that's a very important point to bring out. And I'll bring it up to date with some current affairs. In South Africa,
Australia.
excuse me, South Australia,
Yeah.
there will be a total ban on bow hunting. And South Australia is like one of their provinces or one of our states, effective 1 December of this year, 2024. And it's all because somebody wounded a wallaby, air is still in it, having it run around a residential area for several days before it died. Now, ABF's information that we have has been presented to the government in South Australia in an effort to get the ban reversed. But what the proponents of the ban have come back with is that ABF's information is not yet fully accepted in the bow hunting community. And they're using quotes from some of these people that are naysayers of the data we have that can back it up with no data of their own other than anecdotal information from their hunts that they've done. So there's no other hard data in all of archery that we can utilize when situations like this come up. Now, there have been some recent YouTube videos by some well-known YouTube personalities showing animals wounded and not recovered, and animals requiring multiple shots to dispatch because they used an inadequate arrow setup. And one particular video in particular, okay, I'll use his name, Chris B's video, is being used by proponents of the ban, including members of South Australia's parliament. The full video has been shown in parliament in order to back up their requirement for this ban on bow hunting. And it successfully passed the parliament in South Australia. There is so much publicity that is negative to archery that gets out there. And going back to what Troy said, someday we're not going to have bow hunting. It will be banned unless we can establish information accepted by archery industry and bow hunters that it is adequate, it is an effective and humane method of hunting animals. And one of the things that has to be done is we have to reduce the wound loss rates and documented reduction in wound loss rates.
And then how it was done too.
Absolutely. It is possible to get the wound loss rate with bow hunting equipment well below that of the wound loss rate for firearms. Because my wound loss rate is lower than that, and though not quite as low as mine, Rob's is also below that. Now, this is documented for both of us across hundreds of animals.
Yeah.
So it's not just we're saying we have a low wound loss rate. We actually have the numbers of animals that are involved in it. So building all this information is something we're going to have because, like you said, one of these days, all of this information will be needed or we will lose the right to bow hunt.
Well, the more I get into this stuff, the more I realize how little defense from the results, but how did you get to the results? And then I'm in my real job, my day job, I'm basically a paralegal. For 20 years, I've been negotiating all kind of stuff, and I spent a ton of time around attorneys. And there's been a couple of times I was in deposition, and they hand me files that are written and ask me for if it's accurate or not, if it's true or not. There's no screwing around. There's no gray area when you're in court. And one of these days, hopefully it never comes. But I'm glad that the information's there. So let's spin into momentum.
All right.
because you smoked my head and I just never thought of it this way. So I've been trying to think of a simple way to lay this out, and I think I might have it. You said to me as I was unpacking this thing, and you've answered so many. If any of you people are on the comments and you see old derelict come through, that's this man right here. That's Dr. Ed. So if you get a reply from the old derelict, you know that it's Ed. And he's been super active on that other video about FOC, trying to answer everybody's questions, which have been great. Momentum has come up over and over and over again. And you said something to me. You said momentum has two components: speed and mass.
Yep.
And the penetration, the mass is a higher contributor to penetration. And the speed, as I've said a lot, is always slowing down. In other words, it's reducing all the time,
Absolutely.
but the mass never changes. However, we need Dr. Ed to tell us, what does that mean? Because it's hard to explain. It's
You got it sorted down in a nutshell.
right.
It really comes down to what's called the impulse momentum.
Mm,
And that is the change in the momentum, the difference between the air's impact momentum and what its remaining momentum is after the event, whatever that event happens to be. In this case, breaking a heavy bone.
or even
Uh,
if it's even the thorax, even a perfect shot.
Even a thorax hit,
Right.
it doesn't matter. Hitting the
Right.
hide by
Right.
itself, there will be a momentum change.
Right.
So there's an impulsive momentum involved there. There would be one for completely penetrating and passing through the animal.
Mm-hmm.
Or there will be one for the arrow that stops in the animal. In that case, the impulse momentum is going to be the same as the momentum of the arrow when it hit.
Mm.
So you always have this impulse momentum involved. But this impulse momentum is dependent upon the arrow's momentum, which is its mass and its velocity. And that mass is never, ever going to change. Now, and one of the questions we had, it came up about heavy bows, 100-pound plus bows. And had we tested the 650 grain arrows out of those type bows, compounds? And yes, we have gone that far with the testing. Now we haven't done in 100-pound plus bow with vertical bow, but we have got up to close to 90 pounds with vertical bows.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so far, within the capabilities of the velocity range of arrows today, we can't document any movement in that 650 grain heavy bone threshold mass for the arrow.
Mm-hmm.
But because at these low velocities, the preponderance of the momentum of the arrow is carried by the mass of the arrow, and our velocity and our energy is so low that momentum is a mass of the arrow is the only thing that's going to give us sufficient push to breach the heavy bones,
Or even a thoracic hit. So I'm
or
thinking
even a
about
thoracic hit.
people get a little wrapped around the axles about the heavy bone thing. You and I are going to do another video on that. But
Yeah.
we
Now,
see we see a lot of low performance is what I would call it. If it doesn't pass through, I consider that to be low performance.
yeah.
Um, on as people lower the mass of their arrow and then increase the velocity, because that's how we do it in archery. So they're, for whatever reason, they're lowering it down and increasing their velocity. And then
Well,
thus
speed
the total
sells.
momentum goes down. You've done you've increased the drag. You've increased the drag and resistance at the target, whatever it hits, just a chest wall hit, and there's no mass.
Yes.
So
So
help us
even though you
understand
can
that.
push the velocity and get the momentum high,
Hmm.
uh, with what we're dealing with eras, uh, you're not going to get the penetration you need. You know, at some point, the mass required in an era to breach the heavy bone threshold will decrease. We just aren't there yet. You know,
You're,
the
I think that velocity change is
actually
going to have to be
secure.
200 feet per second, though, Ed. It's not 40 feet per second. It's a lot.
Yeah, we've only tested, the lowest I've tested has been with the 650 grain error was at 125 feet per second, and it still worked there. Now with a slightly heavier, and I think it was around 720, 725. We tested down to 119 feet per second.
Hmm.
These penetration maximized errors
Hmm.
are still giving a 100% heavy bone breach rate.
And then on thoracic hits, you're talking about a zip through, just like
Oh
that.
yeah, a thoracic hit on a light animal is certainly a zip through. Now you put that on a buffalo, you're dealing with two very heavy ribs, one
Right.
on inches, one on
Right.
X.
As the animals increase in size, those
Yes,
bones are going to change just because they're huge.
that's why we recommend going up to even heavier eras with the heavy animals, the buffalo, and even heavier for the pachyderms.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Those are whoppers.
Yeah,
So
go
um,
ahead.
in the study, you talk about the time of impulse, the push you said earlier
Yes,
on the bone and how bones break, even if it's a rib. Let's say we hit edge of scapula rib from a tree stand, which is super common because it's a downward shot on a deer.
yes,
It's not the velocity that gets it done. It's the amount of time that that shaft keeps shoving. That's
that's right. But bones are made not only to support the body but to protect. So they have movable joints where bones meet.
yeah,
You the bone will move at that joint. So there is that degree of bone movement. But bones also are flexible when they're fresh bones.
yeah, green ones,
Old
right?
bones
In
get break.
situ. Mm-hmm.
So the air has to push long enough to overcome that movement of the bone at its articulation with another bone. That's got to stop. Then whatever flex the bone has to be overcome before the air even begins to penetrate the bone. So a lot of your air momentum, or a good portion of it, will be used up before it ever starts to penetrate the bone. So there, in those two sequences, your momentum impulse has to be high enough that you have enough reserve or remaining momentum to go ahead and penetrate the bone.
Okay, great. You just said something you didn't realize you said. I got this from a couple of people offline. Had one guy call me, and there's a lot of people who are wishing for a perfect test medium that would tell us the number, the momentum number that is the number. And when I was
It,
talking to one of the guys, I said, you cannot find that number because every hit is completely different, even amongst whitetails. If you hunt them
yes,
where your house is, they're what I call Jimmy Buffett deer. They're little old skinny coos deer sized deer. They're not big, right?
they're impala size.
Right. And then an axis may walk out, and that's a completely different sized animal.
Yes, sir. He's
And
big
then
mule deer size.
this person who wants to have this impulse number, let's just say it's zero point 0.7 slugs, okay? they want to go deer hunting, elk hunting, and they may think about shooting an American buffalo with it.
Well, the real simple reason you can't use momentum is just what we were talking about. It has two components. It has velocity and it has mass.
Mm-hmm.
So you can take a light object, drive it fast enough, and have enough momentum to breach heavy bone.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can take the heavy object, lower velocity, and have enough momentum to breach the heavy bone. Now, that's going to take me into a little discussion of some of the testing we did with rifles. Um, Not too many people know it, but I also did terminal ballistic research, the performance of the bullets after they hit an animal, for Barnes bullets. And Dr. John Hilliard and I did extensive studies using number of guns. In the first series, we used a 22 Hornet.
But let me stop real quick
And
just so the audience understands, because you've talked to me a lot about this since you gave me the
yes,
300, and you and I have been talking about reloading it and all that stuff. So for the audience, do not get wrapped around the velocity thing he's about to tell you. He said it. He's studying terminal performance at the target with these guns. Not,
yes,
he doesn't care how fast it gets there or slow. He doesn't care what bullet it is, hard nose, whatever. It's going to be a Barnes because he was testing for Barnes. He doesn't care if it's 5,000 grain bullet or 100 grain bullet or 30. Terminal performance on the animal. So you need to get your head wrapped around that when you hear this from Ed, because he's worried about what it does after it hits him. All right. Sorry to cut you off,
okay,
but that needs to be
all
said.
right.
It took
That,
me
that's exactly
about
what
30
we
minutes sitting with you going, oh, he's only worried about the bullets.
Well, we started out testing the 45 grain Barnes X bullet in a 22 Hornet and a 22 250. We ran velocities from 1,800 feet per second up to over 4,000 feet per
All hand
second.
loads, like y'all are
All
doing
handled.
super dialing these shells. Right.
Yes. And we found that we got better penetration. Now, this is a study that involved in excess of 2,000 animals because we did 2,000 Impala in a cull. And at the end of this, if you'll remind me, I would like to talk to people a little bit about culls
Okay.
so that they got some ammunition for the anti-hunters about who are very opposed to culling animals. Anyway, the 22 Hornet gave better terminal performance than the higher velocity 22 250. It gave deeper penetration and a better wound channel, but that's
Same
incidental
bullet,
because we got pedals
same bullet,
stand out better.
right? Same bullet.
Same bullet,
Yeah, you did.
same
Okay.
bullet.
Yeah.
And one of the takeaways from that we were discussing earlier is that the tissue resistance goes up with the velocity. And
Square.
another difference that we encountered between the Hornet and the 22 250 was twist rate. The twist rate of the 22 Hornet, 1 in 16, a very slow twist. And you have a 1 in 10 twist, or it was a 1 in 12 twist, I believe it was, in the 22 250 we used. That means there's a huge difference in the rotational velocity, how fast the bullet is spinning. So you're not only getting an increase in tissue resistance because of the forward motion of the bullet, you're getting an increase in tissue resistance because the bullet is rotating faster in the 22 250. And we recover a huge number of bullets from the 22 250 during this Impala cull.
And it was going faster.
And it was going faster.
Mm-hmm.
And we recovered only one bullet from the Hornet, and that was on a lengthwise body shot from the chest to the hip, and it was pushing the hide on the offside. Now, we started taking lengthwise shots with the Hornet deliberately to catch a bullet.
Right, because you
And
need
it
the bullet
took
to
us
study
a
it.
number
Right.
of shots before we caught one.
Yeah, pass-throughs don't tell you anything, right? Pass-throughs
Right.
give no information.
And we did reach with the Hornet uh, a heavy bone 100% breaching rate, and we tested on animals up to kudu and zebra size. I think that zebra's the heaviest animal by far, uh, shot with a Hornet. And we did some deliberate shots into the humerus and the ball joint of the humerus, and it was able to breach those. Now, if you look at an arrow uh, traveling 340 feet per second,
That's fast.
that's fast. That's only 12.8% of the velocity of that typical 22 Hornet bullets load.
Hmm.
So we're dealing with low velocities between, 340 feet per second and 100 feet per second is not a wide range when we look at the overall range of velocities it takes in order to be able to get enough momentum for a lighter object to breach a bone. Now, these are monolithic bullets, so the bullets they're structurally intact.
Mm-hmm.
They're not losing any of their mass. So we're looking at the performance of this intact low mass being able to breach a heavy bone. You put a typical lead core expanding bullet into that Hornet, it will not break those heavy bones.
Yeah, because it'll blow up.
That's right. So a good example also of why structural integrity is such an important factor. And it applies, not just to arrows. It doesn't matter what you're hunting with. Uh, it's an important factor.
So
Now,
back to
will we?
we'll go back to arrows because
Yeah.
that's information so cool. But so here's I've got about 10 minutes left, but
Oh,
at when the arrow's flying through the air and it weighs 500 grains
yes,
and it launches at 280, 270.
yes.
As it leaves, it is slowing down through the air every inch it moves forward.
That's right.
But the mass
Every
does not
every
change.
millimeter it moves
Every
forward.
millimeter it moves forward. The second it touches anything, perfect hit, broadside, thoracic hit, the
Yes,
resistance forces times velocity squared push back.
that's
That's
right. And
and
you have
but
to
the
remember
mass
that
has never
velocity
changed.
squared. That's the big factor. That resistance goes up the square of the impact velocity.
So what happens then is this equation that was theoretically balanced 50-50. Let's say it was 50% speed and perfectly 50% mass to make the momentum number. Okay.
Okay.
You just sheared off. Let's say you thought your momentum launch number was 0.7 slugs.
Mhm.
We don't know what it is at the target. We know that it's massively reducing from that because the speed is getting eaten alive by the resistance force of the
It,
tissues.
it certainly is.
And
And that's
then,
why air mass is so important.
right, the mass doesn't change. And
It
then
never
you move that
changes.
shot forward into the vital V, and you hit a piece of shoulder meat that's 3 inches thick on a big Midwest whitetail,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got to penetrate all of that meat before it ever encounters a rib. And that arrow's just slowing down rapidly, and that's the trick. There is no
Yes.
momentum number at the bow because you can't predict what's going to happen at the target. And we know for a fact the velocity is going to get eaten alive
Well,
mathematically.
yes. Let's theoretical. Let's assume an offside hit on the humerus or humerus bone. You hit the offside shoulder on an animal.
So you penetrated the animal and then hit the humerus.
Right. Now,
Okay.
we know from testing that a 650 grain penetration maximized arrow, we've got to point that
All
out.
12 factors. Yep.
Every arrow that's 650 grains. It it at 125 feet per second velocity, it will breach that heavy bone. So it doesn't matter. Say it hit with 250.
Mm-hmm.
If it sheds a lot of velocity, but still has 125 feet per second velocity, when it hits that offside bone, it's going to breach that bone.
And then the path through the animal is going to suck a ton of
That's,
energy out of it. And that's
that's
why
right.
you can't say the number is X.
That's right. There's no way to put a momentum value on the error that is going to perform because the distribution of the momentum between velocity and weight is a crucial factor.
But to change the shaft to a 12 factor system, you've got a very low resistance broadhead with a high mechanical advantage, which uses that energy from
More
speed
efficiently.
or mass, whichever
Yeah.
one, well, both of them. But as it approaches that speed's lowering, and that's lowering your momentum value, but that broadhead's so efficient, high forward to center, super sharp, it's going to be able to use that energy efficiently.
Yes. Our era, very efficient era, only from the high performance bow, only
Mm-hmm.
has 70% as much energy as a 22 long rifle cartridge.
Right.
So everything we're doing is designed to conserve that velocity as long as possible during the penetration of the animal
Cycle during the
because
penetration
we don't
cycle.
know where that heavy bone hit is going to occur if it occurs.
Right.
So you want to be ready for it if it does occur, but you don't know if it's going to be on the on side, whether you're hitting the spine on entrance, shooting down out of a tree stand,
Mm-hmm.
or whether you're doing a long quartering shot from the flank of the animal to the offside shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
you
I saw
want
that
to
with
be
Giannis
able
when
to
he
break
killed
that
his nil
shoulder
guy. He got 42 inches of penetration, and the only the last 16 inches of the penetration cycle was in the lungs and the heart because he hit it
down. Yeah.
from right in front of the hip. It
Now,
basically
now
had
for the
22 inches of guts to travel through before it became lethal,
yep,
like immediately lethal. But gut, I think that nail guy was gut shot. It wouldn't have made it. But
you know. But before we reach the end, I want to leave a gem for the high velocity light arrow guys. Like I said earlier, there will be a point where this 650 required mass of heavy bone threshold will diminish. But so far, with the equipment available that we've been able to test, it, there's not enough velocity increase to show any change in that required mass. So
yep.
I'm going to be really interested in testing that comes up and whether we do it or you do it, because I know you already have what we need.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, of the newest crossbows, especially those capable of supposedly reaching 500 feet per second, or the even higher velocities of the arrow rifles,
So let
will
me make a
it,
clarification point there because this is you just said something awesome.
yeah,
Ed Ashby is not, and I know he's going to say yes. Ed Ashby is not opposed to an arrow lower than 650 grains if it performs.
absolutely.
Just as of today, with the stuff we have, it has not been proven that you can beat the 12 factor arrow.
That's true. We can't beat that. And at this point, you can't beat that 650 grain.
So in the future, if we find out that going 450 feet per second with a vertical bow and 527 grains with a single bevel is the new number and it will breach bone, the ABF is probably going to say, yep,
Absolutely.
that's
If
what the
you meet
testing
these
says.
thresholds, this works.
All right, that's cool. We're down to 30 seconds, and that's a cool way to finish off. Thank
Okay.
you, Ed. I know we'll get a lot of comments, so get ready, man. Warm your fingers up.
Oh, and I can only type with one finger of one hand because the
We'll
other
get it
hand is
done.
mostly paralyzed.
Thank you for your time.
You're most welcome. I enjoyed it.